Okay, so let's just dive right in. Have you ever looked at the news and felt like the United States and Europe are just living on completely different planets? It's a question that feels more important now than ever. Today, we're digging into Robert Kagan's classic and honestly kind of prophetic book of Paradise and Power to finally make sense of this huge transatlantic divide. And I mean, the divide is stark, right? On one side, you've got the United States pretty much playing the role of global sheriff. They see a world that's just full of threats that need to be dealt with, often with raw power. But then you have Europe, acting more like a moralizing professor, absolutely convinced that almost any problem can be solved with international law, endless talks, and maybe a few good espressos. One side sees threats, the other sees potential partners.
So, this gets us to the absolute heart of it. Why? Seriously, how did two of the closest allies in modern history, who share so much culture and history, end up with worldviews that are so fundamentally alien to each other? It's a really deep puzzle, and we are about to unravel it.
To really get Kagan's argument, we have to start with this brilliant central metaphor he uses. He describes modern Europe as a Kantian Paradise. Now, I want you to picture a beautiful, perfectly manicured garden. Inside those walls, everything is orderly. Problems aren't solved with fists, they're solved with laws, with treaties, with patient cooperation. It's a world that has, or so it believes, evolved beyond brute force.
But, and this is a huge but, just outside those garden walls lies what Kagan calls the Hobbesian Jungle. And that's the rest of the world. It's messy, it's dangerous, and it doesn't care one bit about the garden's rules. Out here in the jungle, rogue states and terrorists, they don't give a damn about international law. The only thing that keeps you alive out here is strength, pure and simple.
And this is the bombshell at the very center of Kagan's entire thesis. The garden doesn't exist in a magical bubble. Europe's paradise is only possible because someone else is guarding the walls. And that someone, he argues, is the United States, standing on the rampart with a rifle, doing the dirty, dangerous work of keeping the creatures from the jungle out. Now, if you ask a European, you're going to hear a very, very different story. They'll tell you that after the absolute horror of 2 world wars, they made a conscious moral choice. They evolved past the primitive game of power politics. They chose a higher path. And it's a really compelling story of moral triumph. But Kagan says that's just not what really happened.
So let's pull back the curtain on what he calls the secret history of Europe's peace. By 1945, the continent was just a smoking ruin. Economies shattered, cities rubble, military power, it was gone. Europe didn't choose to give up power politics. It had no power left. And here's the crucial part. The U.S. military didn't just pack up and go home. It stayed. It created this massive security umbrella over the whole continent. And that instantly solved the age-old security dilemma. For centuries, France had to live in constant fear of Germany. But suddenly, it didn't have to anymore, because Uncle Sam was basically babysitting them both.
And you can see the result of this pretty clearly when you just look at the budgets. With America footing this colossal bill for security, European nations were suddenly free to spend their money somewhere else. And this is what Kagan means by a sort of parasitic relationship. As U.S. defense spending went through the roof, European defense spending just plummeted. So where did all that cash go? Well, into building those amazing social welfare states they're famous for. The long vacations, national health care, all of it.
But here's the thing. Over the decades, this weird kind of amnesia set in. Generations grew up under this American security blanket and kind of forgot it was even there. They started to think the car was driving so smoothly because they, the Europeans, were just more enlightened drivers. They confused their total dependence on American power for their own moral superiority. And pretty soon they started criticizing the very militarism that was keeping their garden safe. Which brings up a really fascinating psychological question, doesn't it? How does a position of clear military weakness get spun into a story of having the moral high ground? How does not having a big stick suddenly become a virtue?
Well, Kagan explains this with another fantastic parable. Imagine 2 people are walking in the woods, and they run into a giant bear. One person is only carrying a tiny fruit knife. The other is carrying a high-powered rifle. The tools they have will completely change how they see that bear. The person with the fruit knife has to rationalize the threat away. They have to convince themselves, the bear is probably reasonable. We can talk to it. It's just misunderstood. Their only real strategy is hope. But the person with the rifle, they just see a threat to be neutralized, period.
So let's actually break down that fruit knife logic, what Kagan calls the psychology of weakness. Step 1, you admit you're weak. Fighting that bear is suicide.
Step 2, to even cope, you have to reframe reality. You can't live in constant terror, so you tell yourself the bear isn't really a threat. Step 3, you justify your inaction. You decide that fighting is just barbaric, it's uncivilized. And then the final step, step 4, you turn your weakness into a virtue. It's no longer that you can't fight the bear, it's that you have nobly chosen the higher path of strategic patience. So the crucial point is this: your power, or your lack of it, doesn't just shape what you do, it fundamentally shapes how you see reality itself. We all know that old saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, Kagan's brilliant twist on that is, if you don't have a hammer, you are psychologically forced to convince yourself that there are no nails anywhere that need hammering. And look, this profound difference in how to see the world isn't just some academic debate. It has had massive, real-world consequences. This psychological split was tested and ultimately broken by 3 major international crises. Next time, we're going to explore the 3 wars that shattered the transatlantic alliance for good.